Welcome to another special edition of eYe Education. I'm your host, Ed Lecious. We continue to feature the candidates for the Board of Education in Nashua's November 7th municipal election. And joining us on this program is a current member of the board, Sharon Giglio, and she's been on the board since 2020. I want to say 2000.
I know. That would be a long tenure.
But yeah, it would be. But back in the day, when I was growing up, there's been, a lot of turnover of superintendents and board members over the years. Recently, longevity was, I think of Dr. Crisp, John Dimpsches, and then, Ed Keefe was superintendent like forever. And then Dr. Massey had a longevity. And ever since then, the terms have shortened on both sides of that aisle. But Sharon, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you for your service.
Thank you. I'm glad to, obviously, if I'm running again for re-election, it's been worthwhile. The first 2 years, because of COVID, were really difficult. We were sworn in the beginning of January of 2020, and just several weeks later, all the schools closed. And so I want to say that the first 2 years, I learned an awful lot, but it was a lot of learning the hard way. We couldn't meet in person. Everything was done on Zoom. We had, people protesting our meetings outside. For a whole summer, the police had to escort us to our cars for our safety. And it was like, I don't think this is what I ran for.
Well, we've talked before coming on, the situation, no daily paper, limited radio. We do have the eYe Education program, but some of our viewers tuning in today may not know who you are. So who is Sharon Giglio?
Okay, well, I'm a 39-year resident of Nashua who raised two children here who both received a quality education in the Nashua Public Schools. I'm a retired school librarian. I worked 19 years in Chelmsford at a middle school as their librarian. And after I retired, I had the opportunity of doing a long-term library substitute position in 3 of our elementary schools. So I started at Ledge Street School for about a half a school year. And it was then that someone first mentioned to me, you seem really involved with what's happening in the schools. Why don't you run for the Board of Education? And I thought, that's a strange thing to say to somebody. But, and then a year later, I was at Birch Hill for pretty much a half year. And then finally, I was at Mount Pleasant when I got elected to the board. So I needed to leave there in December because I couldn't continue to stay. But all 3 of those were really eye-opening experiences because, like a lot of parents, I think when your children have graduated from the schools, you don't pay the kind of attention you did when they were actually students. And I just assumed my kids got a great education, everything's going along smoothly, and things should be pretty much the same. And my first week at Ledge Street, I realized just how much society had changed, schools had changed, the climate of everything had changed. And I'm really thinking I think I have some more years to give. And when someone mentioned maybe running for the board, I thought, I'll consider it. And I put it way in the back of my mind. But I'm honestly glad that I did. The last 4 years, the first 2 were very difficult, as I said, but the last 2 have been much better. Our board's been working more cohesively the last 2 years. I've learned a real lot about my role and when to speak up and when to listen. And I think as a retired educator, I can bring a lot of that to another term. So I'm hoping to get reelected.
Well, between your kids at New Searles and the 3 schools where you served as a temporary librarian, the socioeconomics of those 4 collectively, I think gave you a pretty good picture, an idea of the Nashua school system.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And, I had worked for 19 years in Chelmsford, which is a small town in Massachusetts, and it's very, very different. I mean, it's probably less than half the size of Nashua with half as many schools. But I still continue to be involved with their school district. When I was getting ready to retire from there, they needed a new secretary for their school committee. So I interviewed and got the job, and I'm still doing that 7 years later. So I go to their meetings twice a month and do the minutes for their meetings. And I actually learned a lot just sitting through their meetings and watching how things happen and what the role of people on the school board is. I learned a lot that encouraged me to run the first time for the Board of Education, because I saw everyday people doing things that I could possibly do if I got elected.
You mentioned things have changed, certainly between the COVID, with what some would say was a dysfunctional board at the time, and the revolving superintendent seat over the years. It seems some stability and civility have returned.
They have, and I find that that's kind of why I decided to run again. The first 2 years in the middle of COVID and everything, I thought, well, I'll just make it through the 4 years and then I'm done. And then things just got so much better over the last 2 years. Not that there are not challenges.
All right.
We have lots of challenges, and I look forward to embracing those going forward. But we seem to listen to each other better, to really hear what we were saying. And we listened to the stakeholders. And I think that we made some really good decisions over the past 2 years. And we did it mostly as a group.
You mentioned challenges. If you're reelected, what do you see as the top 2 or 3 challenges going forward in the next term?
Well, first of all, I'm very concerned that we're not fully staffed, particularly in the paraprofessional realm. I started out as a parent volunteer and then became a para at New Searles before I got my library degree. We still have a lot of openings. We're in a better position than we were a year ago now, but and we're not alone in that. I mean, it's a nationwide problem. But I think that in order to fully serve our students, we need to be completely staffed. So I've been the head of the HR committee of the board. And we've done a lot of interviewing, a lot of hiring, and we get reports before each meeting of how many openings there are, where they are, where the needs are. And so I think that that's one concern, is if we could get back to being fully staffed, then everyone would be getting more of what they need, the staff, the students, the parents.
It seems teaching, nursing, and police officers, which were once the jobs to go to, they're not as attractive to the upcoming generation as they once were, for various reasons. Nashua certainly is competitive in the area when it comes to salaries, but for whatever reason, people aren't looking at those careers anymore.
Yeah, it's really kind of sad. When I was in college, which was a really long time ago, my 3 college roommates were all education majors, and I was not. I was a sociology major. And it's kind of ironic, we get together every 3 weeks and it's a Zoom session, and we all think it's really funny that I'm the one that ended up being permanently in education, because it's not where I started. But at that time, everyone wanted to be a teacher. I mean, you were lucky to get a job because there were so many applicants for every job. But that was the 1970s, so that was a long time ago.
Another issue that will be facing you is redistricting.
And yes, I was going to list that as my second, and I do have a third. Redistricting is something that I think we definitely need to look at, but I think we were rushed into looking at redistricting the elementary schools at the same time we were redistricting for the middle schools. We had to redistrict the middle schools because we were opening, the new school is opening, the McCarthy School, in the fall. So it needed to be done, and it seemed like, okay, well, we have people specialists here helping us. Why don't we look? We haven't done this in over 40 years. Maybe we need to redistrict our elementary schools. But a lot of the information that we got didn't set well with some of us, and I felt that there was a certain amount of pressure put on us to make a decision too quickly. And so in March of this year, I believe it was March, I'm pretty sure, I made a motion that we delay the redistricting for an additional year. It was supposed to happen at the end of this current school year, along with the possible closing of Mount Pleasant at the end of this current school year. And I felt like we needed more time. We needed to do more of the hands-on within our district ourselves without outside consultants. And I also felt that the students who were in kindergarten when COVID hit are this year in 4th grade. And if we took them all and redistricted many of them next year in 5th grade, they would have one more disruption in their elementary school career. It seemed to me it made sense to put it off for another year, because at that time they'll all be going to middle schools anyway. And it passed 6-2 on our board, so I got really good support on that. And I feel like that was one of my prouder moments on the board.
And number 3?
Number 3 is serving our ESL population, our English language learners. We're involved now with the Department of Justice in Concord, and they're overseeing what we're doing, and we're working really hard to meet the needs of not just those students, but all our students. But it's a lot of work, and we need a lot of support, and we need more staff. So those are kind of the 3 things that I'm thinking about and are part of the reason I wanted to continue for another 4 years.
Well, we got a couple of minutes left, and why don't you tell our viewers why you'd like them to vote for you on November 7th?
I would like them to vote for me because I'm a past educator. I've had my finger on the pulse of schools for over 30 years. I know the Nashua schools very well, and I care. I really care about our children and their families, and I feel that we need to move forward as a team, all of us together. And so I'm hoping I can be part of that team for another 4 years.
Well, Sharon, I want to thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for being willing to put yourself out and be on the board and run for re-election. And we wish you good luck on November 7th.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. This was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been watching a special edition of eYe on Education, featuring the candidates for the Board of Education on the November 7th municipal election. I'm your host, Ed Leicius, and we'll see you next time.